What's going on YouTube? This is FineOK, and today I'm bringing you guys the solo lane counter matchup video. So there's not a lot of content on YouTube when it comes to like matchups and stuff in solo, and I thought about doing this for a very long time, but it requires a lot of information and a lot of effort. But we hit our sub goal on stream, and I said and I promised that I would do a counter matchup and just matchup video in the solo lane if we hit the sub goal, and we did. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to split it up into a few part series. I'm going to start off with the first 7 warriors. There's 14 warriors, so I'm going to start off with the first 7 warriors, then the other 7. Then I'm going to go over the viable guardians in solo and their matchups, and then basically everything else, whether it's mages, assassins, because those are probably going to be the have the least amount of actual viable things in their role. In the solo lane role. So yeah, so like I said, starting out with the first 7 warriors, that means we're going to be going over Achilles, Amaterasu, Bellona, Chaac, Cuchulainn, Chulainn, and Guan Yu today in the first video. So this will be warriors part 1. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get right into it. Okay, so the way I have this set up is I'm using SMITE Guru tier list, and I'm going to be using 3 of the tiers on the actual tier list itself. I'm going to use SS, A, and D. And what these signify is SS are the gods in this tier are going to be the matchups that really favor the god that we're talking about overall. So for Achilles, we're talking about Achilles overall here. So all of these matchups are going to be matchups that Achilles does really well in or just owns really hard. The matchups down here in the middle are the matchups that can go either way. And oftentimes they can go towards Achilles, but if the enemy player is just better than them, and they're playing Osiris, then they can usually win that matchup. And then down here are the matchups that are just really bad for the character and you want to avoid at all costs. And if you are playing this matchup, you cannot play like you normally would, and you cannot expect to win the lane very easily. So that's just kind of how it goes. Something to note, just a little disclaimer before we get right into everything, is that matchups vary heavily from player to player. It's very skill dependent. Even if a matchup is in favor of a certain god, if the other player is better than that person and they know how to play the matchup, they can still win it. So this is just kind of like a guide and overall idea to get you familiar with solo lane and stuff like that. And if you aren't familiar with it, just some things to avoid, some certain matchups, or maybe some things that you could play more aggressive in and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's dive right into it. So we're starting off with Achilles. So let's go over all the matchups that Cuchulainn, or not Cuchulainn, but Achilles does really well in. So I have Cuchulainn up here. This is probably the most important one because Cuchulainn is a guy that usually wins lane, but Achilles does really well into Cuchulainn. He bullies him really hard. Not really too much to worry about. Can get pretty easy executes on him. And one of the favorable matchups for Achilles. All these other gods, Achilles just destroys because Achilles is pretty high pressure, and all these gods are low pressure, right? So he kind of just owns all of them. So the way I see Achilles is you either should pick something that can fight him early on, or you pick something that will just outscale him super hard and try and get to the mid to late game, because Achilles' late game isn't that great. So even though some of these gods have better late games, Achilles can really shut them down, especially like Guan Yu clear. Ama has to stand in the wave, so Achilles can get immense amount of poke on him. Like Achilles can stun Wukong dash, just free poke on him, can easily out trade him with autos. These 2 gods he can easily execute and stun their dashes and escape. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So the middle one, like I said, this is one that can go either way. Oftentimes it will go in Achilles' favor, but if it's a good player, then they can really make use of this matchup. So that's really what this A thing is. Usually Achilles, or the god that we're talking about, will win these matchups in A. However, if it's a good player, they will probably win the matchup with this and know how to exploit Achilles in the matchup. Up here, Achilles will almost always win the matchup for the most part, unless you play it really stupidly. So Afro I put in here because, like I said, you should pick a god that can outscale him in the mid to late game. Afro is really good in Achilles because obviously the ult for the execute, Achilles will never be able to execute anyone. The heal for the execute, never be able to execute anyone. And Afro would do so much more in team fights when it comes to the late game as opposed to Achilles. However, the matchup itself in lane, you do have to play correctly. That's why I have it in A and not in SS, because you have to be smart with the matchup. Bellona, it could go either way. A lot of Achilles' damage comes from autos, so Bellona can really counteract that. Same with Osiris. A lot of Achilles' damage is like burst and like over a span of like 5 seconds, so the tether gets really good use here. Not only that, but Osiris wants to fight, Achilles wants to fight, so whoever is hitting more abilities and playing it correctly and avoiding other abilities is going to win that matchup. Chaac I have here because he probably won't ever win lane against Achilles, but he will probably never lose lane against Achilles because he never has to really walk up to the wave. Achilles can not really get too much poke on him, and of course the Chaac heal can help with the execute and stuff like that. Odin, Achilles will usually win this matchup. However, Achilles can't get out of the cage, so that's why I have Odin here. So if it's a good Odin player, he can exploit the fact that Achilles can't get out of the cage and play around the fact that his jungler could come gank and camp the Achilles. And so just play that smart, and then you can get free kills. Athena, more impactful overall just because she has more CC and as a guardian, can be in teamfights and stuff like that. However, the lane isn't that great itself. Achilles should be able to outpoke and trade Athena pretty hard. But like I said, she's just going to outscale him when it comes to teamfights and the rotation power, so I have her there. And then now down in tier, let me rephrase and re-talk about what these tiers mean. So this is the tier where you will probably lose most of the time in this matchup, unless you're playing against a really bad player. If you're playing Achilles into Chang'e, Kama, Herc, or Sobek, you're going to have a rough time. So Chang'e, first of all, immunity for execute, that's rough. You have to stand in the wave as Achilles, so you're going to get poked by every single ability Chang'e uses. She has heals for your execute. She's going to out-trade you most of the time, unless you're like playing around ganks and stuff like that. And of course, her stun is going to be really good for setting up ganks on you. So overall, Chang'e is just going to kind of own you in that matchup. Camazot's kind of the same way. Kama wants to fight. He gets power early, so he can match Achilles' power early. He can jump over the ult execute. He can completely out-sustain all your poke and stuff like that. Has ult for ganks and for the execute. At the end of the day, just has so many ways to play around it. So pretty simple and straightforward there. Herc the same way. He wants to fight early. He wants to fight pretty much throughout the entire laning phase. He gets power from his passive, so he can match Achilles' power from his passive. He also loves using his autos for doing damage and poking the enemy solo. Achilles is the same way, so he just matches all those things and does it a little bit better. And obviously, the heal is insanely encounters Achilles ult pretty well because you just regain all the HP that you just lost that the Achilles wanted to execute you on. So pretty simple. Also, Achilles wants to stand in the wave, especially when he clears and pokes you. He wants to hit you with he wants to hit the wave and you with his abilities. So if you Herc ult the wave, clear the full wave, and then push him, you're already gaining pressure super easily there. And then Sobek, last but not least, another god where it's low pressure and Achilles is a high pressure, so he can maybe bully you a little bit, but you can't really bully out Sobek. You can't really play aggressive as Achilles because you'll just get plucked in the tower. Really simple ganks as far as plucking Achilles because his only CC immunity is ult. You can catch him with your ult. You can't really ult out of your ult because it doesn't go that far, and Sobek ult is pretty large, so you can keep him slowed in that. And it's really hard for him to actually get his damage off with all the peel that you have on Sobek. So just kind of outscales him and can't really bully him in lane. So that's why Sobek was probably a pretty bad matchup for Achilles. So yeah, that's Achilles. Pretty straightforward, like I said. Some of the other gods won't be this straightforward, but since Achilles has been a pretty good god in lane, at least since his release, he was pretty easy for this tier list. So moving on, we should have a Amaterasu up next. So a couple things real quick is, first of all, on the last god, Achilles, I kind of left out a decent amount of gods, and I probably should have mentioned them. However, I am going to leave out some of the gods. I'm not going to even touch the ones over here, some of the gods that I'm going to leave out, because I just feel like they're not worth mentioning, either because it kind of just doesn't really matter. The lane goes either way, whatever. There's not really anything to mention about it or talk about. Or the god just isn't viable in solo, or it's just like a matchup that you very, very rarely see that it's like, you know, who even cares? So I just want to get that across real quick. But also, I did leave out some gods on Achilles on the last one. But for Achilles, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. He probably just wins the matchup, so it's not that big of a deal. However, since Achilles is bad towards the later stages of the game, not bad, but gets falls off a little bit, then if you can survive the laning phase, then it might be a decent matchup. You just have to play it right. So next up, we have Amaterasu. So Amaterasu is kind of straightforward as well, because the reason she isn't played as much as she really should be, since she's so good in the late game, is that she has a lot of bad lanes and a lot of lanes that it's really rough to play into. So let's just talk about those real quick. So these are the three gods that she can do well against. Notice that two of them have channel ability, so she can silence them. She can silence their clear really easily. She also gets a free laning phase when playing against these gods, so pretty simple. And she'll get to her late game form pretty easily, and she'll win the lane as well. So that's really, really nice, because Ama isn't, from ahead, even in the mid game or early stages of the mid game, is kind of a monster. But the problem is she usually isn't ahead because she just has a bad matchup most of the time. And then Chaac, she's good against because Chaac can't really, I mean, he can bully a little bit, but he can't really bully an Ama, especially with her sustain. So Ama will just get a free landing phase once again. So I would pick Ama into Chaac pretty much every time. No questions asked. Can also use her ult to counteract Chaac ult and then stun him after, so he won't have his CC immunity. So just some ways to play around it. So here are the matchups where it could go either way depending on the skill level and everything like that. Afro, Ama can't really bully Afro too hard. Obviously, Afro has the ult for the stun on the Ama ult, so free way to get out of that. But like I said, Ama can't bully Afro too hard, so she'll probably get towards her late game form most of the time in this matchup. So it kind of just goes either way. It's not too crazy there. Cerberus, although you can silence out his slow, you have to stand in the wave as Ama to clear the wave. And Cerberus loves that because he wants to hit the wave and you with his slow. And then obviously if you dash, then your dash is down. And Cerberus can bully you a little bit there with his other 2 damage abilities and of course his ult. You do have your ult in response, but it's just a matchup that can go either way. And you just have to play a little bit careful. Bellona can also go either way. A lot of Ama's damage does come from autos, so Bellona counters her in that way. However, Ama can't silence out her bludgeon, so, you know, they both have their positives here. Kind of depends on the skill level. I think in the same way, can't really bully her out, so she'll get toward her mid-game form where she really thrives with CDR and rotations and stuff like that. However, this can also go towards Amaterasu because you're really fast, and if you get some proxies off and then rotate with your movement speed, then you can be there easily as well. Can't really silence out anything she has besides maybe her taunt sometimes. So Tyr's an interesting one. You would think that Ama kind of owns Tyr a little bit, but Tyr just sustains so much. Every Ama2 that she uses on him for poke, he can easily sustain up with his blue stance heal. And not only that, you have to stand the wave, like I said, as Amaterasu in order to clear the wave and pressure out. And Tyr can fearless you and the wave like he wants to. But at the same time, you can silence out a lot of his abilities, so it can go either way. And you just have to play careful. Mana, the same way, you can silence out his dash. But you're standing in the wave, he's going to hit you and the wave every single time, so it's a little bit sketchy there. But all these matchups, you have to recognize the matchup and play it correctly. So yeah, you just have to learn it a little bit. That's why I've always been hesitant about making a tier list, or not a tier list, but a matchup video, because if I really want to show you, I'd have to be very specific, which first of all I don't really want to do. I want to teach people general things and things that they can learn off of and use in the future, and not have to come back to me to learn. They can just learn themselves when they're playing it. And also because it's really hard to teach like how to play Amaterasu versus like a matchup where it could go either way. You know what I mean? You just have to play it for yourself and figure it out. So Baron could also go either way. You're really fast as Amaterasu, so you can dodge a lot of his abilities, so that's nice. Also, your ult lasts almost as long as his ult, so you can never really get sucked in. He is really immobile, so you can easily get stuns on him. However, at the end of the day, Baron is a lane bully, and Ama kind of hates lane bullies because she can obviously get bullied in the early game and not get towards her late game. Erling can also go either way. You can silence out his dash, which is really nice. Once you do that, you can also get a free stun on him. However, he still has his heal. He still is a lane bully as well. If he gets his combo off on Ama, it's really nice. But when it comes to mid game, Ama's definitely a good pick into Erling. Sobek's the same way. Sobek can't bully out Ama's early game, so Ama can get towards her late game for free. However, Sobek kind of outscales her a little bit, in my opinion. Just has a little bit more CC, doesn't rely on his ultimate to actually set up and disrupt people. But, you know, if you're playing Amaterasu and it's good into the comp and everything like that, then definitely a matchup that could go your way. Wukong the same way. You have to stand the wave as Amaterasu to clear the wave almost every time. Wukong can hit you with all of his abilities in the wave. So that's really good free poke. However, you can also silence his escape. So notice one of the things that Ama has going for is her silence, especially on channeled abilities. So yeah, you just have to learn this matchup a little bit and make sure that you're sustaining up Wukong's poke as much as you can. And then going down to the worst matchups for Ama, things that you want to either avoid or play very careful in and learn to the best of your ability, are all these matchups down here. Achilles we talked about before. Standing in the wave just is a lane bully, really hard, can easily out-trade Amaterasu, and it's just a really rough matchup for her. Ardio, same way, gonna cripple out her dash for one. Something I didn't mention in the last one was Ardio. Ardio versus Achilles, I think, is actually a good matchup for Ardio. So if we could go back for Achilles, throw Ardio down in D if you ever need to pick into to Achilles pick Ardio for a few reasons. Sustain for the ultimate execute, cripple for the dashes that he wants to use, stun out for, like, you can stun out his one when he looks like he's going to use it, and you overall just slow him down and can bully him out. So Ardio's the same way against Amaterasu. Obviously Ardio's a lane bully. You're going to sustain all of her poke. She can get her ults on you and she can silence her dashes, but the matchup's just so rough for Amaterasu that I think it's not even worth really mentioning the fact that you can do that. The only time you're going to make use of that is when Amaterasu is getting a gank from her jungler and you're killing the Ardio. So Ardio definitely good into Ama. Cam in the kind of same way, can jump over both of her abilities, has a crazy sustain, is a lane bully already, so it can already out sustain Ama. Also has AoE autos, so when she's sitting in the wave, he can clear the wave and hit her. So that's another thing that's going wrong with her. Same thing with Cuchulainn. Lane bully, can hit the wave and her. Wants to hit the wave and her, can out-trade her pretty easily, especially in his transformation. Just a lane bully. Pressures her out early game, can invade blue buffs off of it and stuff like that. So rough for Ama. Chang'e, same thing as before. Since she's staying in the wave, you're hitting the entire wave with all of your abilities as Chang'e. You can immune Ama stun on her ult with your 2. Really hard for her actually to kill you. Just really rough matchup. Not only that, but also the ranged autos are really important. Ama wants to be up close and hitting you, and Chang'e's got her ranged autos and her ranged abilities just to poke you with. So it kind of goes the same with Zhang, standing in the wave, getting free poke on her. Can bully out early game because Zhang's kind of a bully early on, especially now. You can not target. I always call it target. You can card the entire wave plus her, so free poke. Easy to sustain up on her damage as well. She does have the fact that you're kind of immobile as Zhang, so she can stun you pretty easily, but you're so tanky as Zhang, and if you pop your ult right before, you're going to get a lot of damage off. So the only time that would matter is if you're getting ganked. Hercules is just a big lane bully who always wants to fight. Ama's kind of the opposite of that in the early game, so obviously it's going to go bad, and since you're standing in the wave, Herc can push you and the wave and get free damage off and while clearing the wave and just kind of own you. Same thing, he can do it with his boulder. And then Osiris, last but not least, can easily tether out your clear, so you're not going to be able to full clear the wave. If you ever dash the wave, he can go on you super hard. He can ult either over it or kind of predict where you're ulting and then root you afterward, and just has a lot of chase potential, a lot of kill potential, and obviously the AoE autos make it really hard for Ama to clear the wave without getting poked to smithereens. So yeah, I noticed that Ama has a lot of bad matchups. I mean, that's kind of the reason that she is not as played as much as she really should, because of her strong mid to late game. So hope that explains a thing or two about Amaterasu. So Bellona is up next, and this one's a little bit weird because there's a lot of gods in the middle. There's some gods that I'm not even going to put in the tier list because I don't think it's even worth mentioning. But it should be pretty quick and simple, and I'll explain why there's so many gods right there, right in the center of it. So Bellona doesn't really have any interrupt apart from the stun on her ult. She doesn't have a crazy amount of sustain, but she does have a lot of trade potential because she can counteract the autos for one, but also because she just does so much damage with her autos and can clear really well with her AoE. So because she can't really interrupt many things, and also really relies on the mechanics of autos and the right timing of her abilities, she doesn't really have any bad matchups, but she also doesn't really have any great matchups, right? It's really hard, especially now with the removal of Death Toll and stuff like that. It's really hard for her to bully out gods that are pretty bad early, especially things like like Afro, Ama, stuff like that. She's just really good at boxing, so if they play into you, then you can win that matchup really easily. So it just kind of depends on how they're playing it. If they're playing it really smart, it's going to be really hard for you to get a super big lead, especially any solo kills or things like that. However, at the end of the day, Bellona does have the fact that she can outclear pretty much everyone early on because of her bludgeon. It just is you group up the wave and easily clear that. So you have the potential to snowball and outclear them and maybe look for rotations and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you automatically win the lane. So that's why I just have all these gods here. Honestly, I don't even know if Guan Yu should be an SS. I might as well throw him in A. There's not a lot of lanes that Bellona now really wins. You can win a lot of these lanes, but like I said, it kind of just depends on how the enemy is playing it, as opposed to every other matchup and things we've talked about before. I mean, even Nike, a lot of these gods you do bully out, especially early on, but does that mean you win the lane? I don't think it does now, especially as Bellona. So that's kind of why Bellona isn't seeing as many picks anymore, because she kind of lost her bully potential. And it really does, like I said, depend on how the enemy is playing it. So pretty much all of these gods she could easily win against. And a lot of these gods do rely on autos, so if they do play into you and the fact that, you know, you can counteract their autos and get a lot of trade damage off, then maybe you'll win the lane. And if you can find a solo kill or anything like that. But I think their biggest potential right now is the fact that she out clears everyone and can easily hit 5 early, especially invading back camps and maybe even looking for the first blue buff respawn. But you kind of rely on your jungler for that kind of aspect. So that's why I have all these gods in A. Because in my professional opinion and my professional advice, you shouldn't be thinking too much about the matchups for Bellona nowadays. I don't think you have to think about them too much, apart from the fact that she has a couple bad matchups. I think that Sobek is a really good matchup into her because he can keep her in lane forever. Even though she out clears him pretty hard, she can pluck him in a tower when she's playing up to clear the wave, so that's a big disadvantage. She can interrupt his bludgeon, obviously. And once he gets full CDR, he actually outtrades her a little bit because Sobek does not at all rely on autos. He relies on his abilities completely. So once he gets that full CDR, even though she may be out clearing him, as long as you're playing it correctly as Sobek, you should be able to bully out the Bellona pretty easily. And the same thing with Cerberus. Cerberus is kind of like a different Sobek. One thing, the main reason that I have Cerberus down here in D, or Bellona, and the fact that it's a bad matchup for Bellona, is that you can ult, Cerberus can ult Bellona when she's bludgeoning, and she can't interrupt her bludgeon. She has to use her bludgeon, so that means she can't ult during it, so you get a guaranteed ult. So that's one of the biggest upsides to playing Cerberus into Bellona. Also the fact that Bellona, you know, kind of stands in the way, so Cerberus can hit her with all of his abilities. The Scourge heal that she gets, you know, Cerberus obviously gets, and he can also keep Bellona in lane for a while and can match her clear because Cerberus also has really good clear. So something else to note, and why I have all these gods in A, and maybe even some of these other gods that you may see Bellona play into that could be in A. The reason I have a lot of these gods in A is that you also can change your playstyle on Bellona. So a lot of times you can max your bludgeon, but if they have a way to interrupt it or reduce the damage on it, then you can max your Scourge. Or if you feel like you're going to get poked really hard and you won't be able to push up to the wave too hard on Bellona, you can max your Scourge and you can heal off the wave and have better clear. So there's different ways to play it. You're not auto trading as much and you're using your abilities more. So there's just different things like that, and it's really, really intricate. So I don't think there's any matchups where you're like, yes, I'm going to pick Bellona and I'm going to destroy this lane anymore. I really don't think so, especially if you're a good player and they're a good player. However, there are things that you can do, and if somebody makes a tiny mistake, you can capitalize on, and that's why I have all these gods in A. So Bellona, pretty quick and straightforward. Not as good as she used to be, but definitely still a viable pick. And I think if you're a really good Bellona player and know how to play her correctly into these certain matchups, and you know have different play styles and stuff like that, then you can definitely make good use of her. So next up we have Chaac. One more thing that I want to talk about, since this is going to be a long series. The gods that, like, especially like the Guardians and some mages and assassins that you do see be played in solo that I'm not putting in the tier list in this matchup, I'm going to talk about their matchup specifically. So for example, Xingtian, like Xingtian, you know, he may have a decent matchup into Chaac. Well, not Chaac's not a great example, but into a certain god that I'm talking about, such as like Bellona, maybe. Like for example, like I could have used Xingtian in the last tier list for Bellona, and I could probably have put him in a matchup that can go either way, or even in Xingtian's favor. But for certain gods that just you don't see played a lot right now, I'm just going to keep until I get to them specifically, and then I'll talk about their good and bad matchups. I don't want to have to repeat that. I'm only repeating these certain gods because they're just played so often in this meta and stuff like that. So I hope that makes sense. So like I said, we have Chaac now. So go through Chaac real quick. I think he has a really good matchup in early action because you can silence out his escape, his ult really easily. You have attack speed reduction and a slow on your Rain, which both counter early because he's an attack speed kind of god, and also he is not slow immune in anything in his kit, so you can easily kill him, especially with ganks. He outscales you a little bit, but it is a really good matchup for Chaac in my opinion. It's really hard for Erling to bully out the Chaac in that matchup. Odin's kind of the same thing. You can get out of his cage. It's really hard for him to bully you out because he wants to jump on the wave and you're going to be up on his wave at the same time, so he can never really poke you out too much. You can sustain it up. And one of the biggest things in my opinion for this is you can make really good use of your Chaac ult for Odin cage in fights, because if Odin ever uses his cage, you just Chaac ult in around it, and the 3-second silence on that is going to be really nice for like disengaging and keeping people away from killing people in the Odin cage. So that's why I like that matchup. Everything else down here, it can go either way. But mainly, it's not that it can go either way. It's mainly that Chaac can't really bully these people out, but also at the same time, they can't bully him out because Chaac is kind of a god that's like an anti-bully. It's really hard to bully him because he can clear from a distance. He has really good sustain. His ult is really good safety in solo lane. So you can kind of pick him in any matchup and kind of feel good about it, apart from some of these down here. So what it comes down to is, one, can you be more impactful in the mid game? Because you won't be more impactful than pretty much any other solo laner in the late game, because Chaac's pretty bad in the late game. However, can you not get bullied in these matchups, for one, and all these matchups in A, and then get to the mid game where you're going to be a little bit impactful, make sure that you're hitting multiple people with all your abilities, using your silence at the right time and stuff like that. So yeah, I could go talk about these a little bit, and I guess I will. You know, basically against Achilles, you're clearing from a distance, trying to not get poked. Same thing with Cuchulainn. You have Chaac ult for Cerberus ult, so you never really get ulted in a tower. You can match his sustain. He will get the sustain off your sustain, but he can't really bully you out. Baron, you can 1-2 out of his ult, so you never get hit by it, and at the same time, you also have that 2-second CC immunity duration on your Chaac ult, so that's really good for his ult. You can also avoid his heal by using your 2 to escape and stuff like that, so not too bad of a matchup, can go either way. Athena, kind of the same thing, can't really bully her out. She'll get to her mid-game. She'll out-rotate you, but if you can be impactful in the mid-game, then it's nice. Osiris can't really bully you. You can get out of his tether pretty easily. You can save your Chaac ult for his tether, for his stun. You can sustain up. You can sit under a tower and play that game where he's going to poke you, and you're going to throw your 1 out and try and poke him because you have sustain and he doesn't, so you can match that a little bit, and he shouldn't be able to own you too hard. Bellona's kind of the same way. You have attack speed reduction for her, but she's never really ever going to get bullied by you, and she's going to out-clear you, especially early game, so nothing too crazy there. Guan Yu can match your sustain a little bit with his sustain. You can only interrupt his clear with your ultimate, which, you know, can sometimes be useful, but he's going to be able to get out of the early game pretty easily because Chaac can't really bully him too hard. Sun Wukong, it's kind of the same way. I think Wukong actually bullies Chaac a little bit in this because he does have the long range poke, but at the end of the day, Chaac is the anti-bully and he has that crazy sustain, so he won't be worried about that too much. Same thing with Ymir. I threw Ymir in here because Ymir usually actually owns some of the warriors, but he doesn't really own Chaac too much because Chaac can just play back and never get hit by the freeze when Ymir is freezing the wave and the enemy solo. Nike, you can interrupt her clear with your ultimate. Same thing with Guan Yu, but at the end of the day, you're using a long cooldown for that, so it's not that great. Nike's late game is a little bit better than Chaac in my opinion, but her early game is just as bad. Or just as rough. I don't think it's bad. Like, Chaac's early game isn't bad, I don't think. It's just as non-impactful, I guess you could say. So you both kind of just get out of the laning phase, but she should be a little bit more impactful than you in the late game team fights and survives a little bit longer. Vamana, I think, can bully you a little bit, but at the end of the day, he wants to hit somebody that's standing in the wave, and you don't really have to do that as Chaac, so that can go either way. And the same thing with Tyr, he wants to hit somebody that's standing in the wave, and you're not really doing that as Chaac, so you can match his sustain and not really get poked by him ever if you're just playing back, but he can outclear you, especially early on. So and then these matchups, I think, are just pretty bad for Chaac, and I just wouldn't play him. Amma, we talked about before, has a lot of utility as far as he can get out of her ult, or he can get out of Chaac's ult, or she can get out of Chaac's ult, rather. Sorry, my bad. Both you, Amma wants to stand the wave, and that doesn't really matter against Chaac. You're not really going to get punished for that too hard. You're going to get out of your early game as Amaterasu. That's the main thing. It's not like Amaterasu can bully out of Chaac, like I said. Nobody really does that for the most part, except for a few of these gods. But the fact that Amaterasu just gets out of her early game for free, basically, against Chaac, is why I don't think it's that great of a matchup, and you might as well play something that can punish her, or it will scale with her to late game. Because if Chaac can't bully her in the early game to punish that, and he also can't match her late game, then, you know, why play it into her? RDO is actually one of the few guys I think can bully Chaac because she has the long distance route, for one, and if you ever 1-2 as Chaac, RDO will run you down super hard. She can match your sustain, she can cripple out your escape, you can silence her dash and stuff like that, so you do have that going for you, but at the end of the day, you're using it defensively most of the time, and it's just a rough matchup, and you will get poked super hard. Chang'e, the same thing, long distance poke. That's why a lot of these guys right here I have down here, because they have the long distance poke and long distance sustain. A lot of these guys up here don't have that, and they want to fight you face to face, and since Chaac can just throw out his clear from a distance, then they can't really bully him out. But these gods can do that, and they can match the sustain. Same thing with Gamma, can throw out his poke from a distance. Can clear the way with his autos and save his abilities to poke Chaac, so that's rough for them. He can jump over Chaac ult, he can jump over Chaac 1. He will definitely out sustain Chaac, so same thing goes there. Herx I put here because he just is better than him at all stages of the game. Bullies him out in lane, bullies him out in mid game team fights. More impactful, much more impactful, I think, in team fights in the late game. And if Chaac ever uses his escape to clear the wave or just pushes up, then Chaac or Herc will just go on him super hard and kind of own him. And he can use his ult to immune the Chaac ult, knock up and silence. And if he's ever feel like they're trying to burst him off of Chaac ult, he can use his 3 right before it and sustain pretty much all of that up. And Afro is kind of the same thing as Amaterasu, just gets out of the laning phase for free, is going to outscale Chaac super, super hard when it comes to team fights and stuff like that. So why not pick a god that can bully her, or pick a god that can scale with her to the late game and be as impactful. So can match sustain easily by Chaac. Also has her Afro ult for Chaac ult, so she'll never get CC'd by Chaac ever, since Chaac's only CC is his knockup and ult, and of course is slow. So yeah, Chaac's pretty straightforward. A lot of these guys that we're talking about to begin with are straightforward, since you just see them so often, and there's not too much to talk about. So yeah, that's Chaac. So we're actually going to end the video on Cuchulainn today because I didn't realize how much I'd be talking about each god. So hopefully in the next video I can speed it up a little bit. But to end the video, like I said, we're going to be talking about Cuchulainn. So Cuchulainn's been the best god in solo for a long time, and there's a reason for it. I mean, you can already tell. Look at how many good matchups he has. And even the matchups down here that kind of can go either way, he can do really, really well. And I think, and there's only a few matchups where I think like, hey, you pick this into Cuchulainn if you really want to win lane and really, really do things. But at the end of the day, even Cuchulainn, with how good he is and how good he always has been, can still be really impactful in the team fights. So no matter who we talk about right here, even if he's losing lane, even if he's winning lane, when it comes to the late game, Cuchulainn's going to do Cuchulainn things. So let's get right into it. For the gods that you definitely want to pick Cuchulainn into and have really good matchups are Amaterasu, Cerberus, Aphrodite, Guan Yu, Erlang, Odin, Tyr, Nike, Wukong. Notice all these low pressure ability warriors he just definitely outscales, because instead of having 4 abilities, he has 8 abilities. He can transform and he can auto super hard, and he just can interrupt some of these abilities with his dash and his transformation. He outclears them. He can be more impactful in team fights because he has 8 abilities and has a really big circle knock up and stuff like that. So we'll go through each one. Amaterasu stands in the wave. Of course, that's what Cuchulainn dreams of when he's playing first as a character. He can bully her out early, especially because Ama's early game is bad. Cuchulainn's early game is really good. Can evade first blue buff. Can jump over Ama ult. Can jump over Ama 2. Just has so many things going for him against her. Same thing with Cerberus. Can jump over jump over Cerberus ult, jump over Cerberus stun. Can interrupt his slow when he's transformed. He doesn't really have to worry about Cerberus matching or taking his sustain away, because the only sustain he has is with his Gladiator shield and his health pots and stuff. And the fact that he doesn't have mana. Just a lot of things going for him. 2 CC immune ults, so never getting ulted by Cerberus. Can bully him out, especially has anti-heal for him. Just so many things. Same thing with Afro, just really bullies her out early on. Can basically start proxying whenever he wants, especially when he transforms. A bunch of other things as far as just out clearing, have a much better early game, so he can maybe invade speed buff, invade back camps and stuff like that, especially if you're playing it correctly. So just a free lane for Cuchulainn, and definitely not a free lane for Aphrodite. She has to center her tower the entire time, so it's basically a 5v4 for the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game. Next up is Guan Yu. Same thing. Guan Yu has to sit in the wave. That's perfectly what Cuchulainn wants. Can interrupt his Talu Assault in his transformation. Has 2 CC immune ults for Guan Yu ults. Obviously a bully in the early game. Guan Yu is not a bully in the early game, so can kind of get bullied pretty hard and can get chased down really easily. So Erlang, another good matchup in my opinion, just because Erlang doesn't have any CC immunity in his kit, so he's going to get hit by the knockup every single time. So if he turtles away, all Cuchulainn has to do is ult him in the wave, and he's going to get his transformation off and get pressure, and Erlang will almost always have to ult. Another thing is he can root him while he's dashing away. He can interrupt his turtle with his dash on Cuchulainn. So many things going for him there. And obviously Erlang wants to sit in the wave, and Cuchulainn is just a big bully as far as that goes. Although Erlang can fight back a little bit, and if you play it correctly, you can do at least okay in this. But at the end of the day, it's still a really good matchup for Cuchulainn, and you kind of want to avoid it as Erlang. It's kind of the same thing with Odin. Like Odin can do well in this matchup. He can, but it's very rare. And the only reason he can do well in this matchup is because he can ult Cuchulainn in his transformation, and Cuchulainn can't get out. So the only time he's really doing well is when the jungler is ganking and they're getting a kill on Cuchulainn after he transforms. And sometimes that can be a free kill, but sometimes Cuchulainn can fight back. But that's only because the jungler is there. So because it's only when the jungler is there, it's definitely still a bad matchup for Odin, so you want to avoid it. Cuchulainn can jump over his bird bomb, stuff like that. Still a bully in the early game. If Odin uses escape on the wave, Cuchulainn will just go on him and bully him out. Same thing with Tyr. He has anti-heal for his blue stance heal. He can go on him super hard. Tyr wants to fearless the wave and be, super aggro and play up in the lane, and Cuchulainn obviously would like that so that he can go on him and be aggressive with transformations and stuff like that. So you could play this matchup as Tyr and not get too far behind and not get owned too hard. But at the end of the day, like, why not just pick something that's could do well in that regard? Even though that's rough because Cuchulainn's just such a good god. Nike, same thing, is not going to be immune in her one, so she can use that to stop the Cuchulainn ult, but it's just going to get super out pressured early on. Can get her one interrupted by the transformation dash on Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn can basically do whatever he wants in the early game because Nike isn't that great early on, so he can start proxying when he wants to, and he's just going to dominate this lane. Same thing with Wukong, just going to dominate the lane early on, especially with like the Rise of Mage's Blessing, stuff like that. Wukong going with Mage's Blessing is still pretty squishy, and Cuchulainn can make really good use of that. Can interrupt his 3, even his Ox form, because even though it's knockback immune and knockup immune, some Wukong Ox or Cuchulainn 3 can still interrupt it. So has that going for him. Can force his ult a lot of the time and has the anti-heal for the ult for a little bit. So yeah, that's nice. And even in these matchups, like I said, Cuchulainn probably will win most of the time just because he's such an OP god. But these are the matchups where it could go either way, and a lot of player skill is involved, independent. So Ardio can definitely match the sustain. Is a bully early on as well, but Cuchulainn is Cuchulainn will usually outtrade Ardio if he can time his transformations correctly. However, it's not going to be too bad for Ardio, and this is one of those matchups where player skill is definitely needed, but nobody's probably going to die, and they're just going to bully each other till the end of the time. Athena will get bullied in this matchup a little bit. However, I think that it's a good, or at least an okay matchup, and something that you could get away with, especially if you're pretty good at Athena, in that you can ult early on in the game where Cuchulainn won't be there and buy TP and still, be able to push your way so Cuchulainn doesn't ever get your tower or get like buffs or anything like that. But you can be impactful in the fact that you can be in team fights where Cuchulainn can't be, when he definitely wants to, right? Bellona we talked about before. Cuchulainn does rely on autos a little bit, so Bellona counteracts that a good amount. He can't really interrupt the bludgeon, however he can jump over it. But it's just one of those matchups that nothing really is going to happen too much. People probably won't die, and a lot of player skill is involved, and when the junglers are ganking is when it really gets spicy. Chang'e I put here, even though Chang'e I think bullies out Cuchulainn a little bit, just because Chang'e is like the biggest bully in the game. The fact that Cuchulainn still has early pressure and is a warrior and can evade that blue buff and stuff like that, it makes it really good. However, Chang'e will outclear Cuchulainn when he isn't transforming. So Camazot's another thing. Can jump over a couple of Cuchulainn's abilities, obviously, so that's good for him. Can match the, well, not match the same, but can out-sustain him super hard. So this was a pretty bad matchup before, especially when Camo was a good pick. However, I think it's still a little bit based on player skill now, and depending on how Cuchulainn and Camazotz play it, that it could go either way. Chaac, not really, it doesn't really go either way. I think Cuchulainn kind of wins that matchup pretty hard, but the fact that Chaac can't really get bullied out and can always be ready to like fight at blue buffs and stuff like that is why I have Chaac in A and not up here in a terrible matchup. Same thing with Osiris. This is one of those matchups that's very skill dependent in my opinion. I do think Cuchulainn wins it a majority of the time, or at least a little bit more than he loses it. However, I think a good Osiris player, like a very good Osiris player versus just a good Cuchulainn player, will actually win that matchup against Cuchulainn like 99% of the time. A couple of reasons why. They both want to fight, right? Obviously, Osiris is really good at fighting. Tether's really good for a lot of the burst damage that Cuchulainn wants to spit out. Not only that, but Osiris can ult over some of the ults that Cuchulainn brings, and can poke him super hard. That's the main thing. Osiris has really good poke, whereas Cuchulainn has no sustain early on in the game, apart from health shots and stuff. So that's something he has going for him, and Osiris can make abuse of. So as long as he's poking him correctly, I think Osiris can do well in that matchup. But at the end of the day, Cuchulainn will be Cuchulainn and will definitely outscale Osiris, even if he somehow loses lane. Sobek can go either way, not because Sobek's really going to win the lane, but because Cuchulainn wants to play super aggressive, and Sobek's kind of the anti-aggressor because he can pluck people into his tower, he can keep people in lane, and he'll outscale that person usually. Cuchulainn, I don't think he outscales too hard. He does offer a little bit more CC and allows more frequency of that CC. However, like I said, it's not like he's bullying him out, so it's not like he's winning the matchup. He's just not losing the matchup and allows himself to outscale a little bit there. And then the 3 gods that I really think are the only 3 gods in the game that will do really well into Cuchulainn almost all the time are Achilles, Hercules, and Baron. I've talked about Hercules so many times on my stream and stuff like that. I think Hercules is just a really good matchup to Cuchulainn, even though Cuchulainn has anti-heal on his 1, so he has the anti-heal for Herc 3. He also has the ability to jump over Herc ult, jump over the Herc pull and push. A lot of times Cuchulainn can jump over the push before Herc can get it off, even if he hits the pull. Even though he has all those things going for him, he still easily gets out-traded by Herc, even if Cuchullainn's timing his transformations correctly. Especially once Herc gets breastplate and is heal maxed, you are going to get owned as Cuchulainn. Like, your Cuchulainn matchup is going to go down the hill fast. And not only that, but you want to play super aggro as Cuchulainn, so you're going to get pulled and pushed in a tower a lot of the time. You have to be super cognizant of that, and you have to play it super carefully to make sure you don't get pulled and pushed. So he's kind of the same as Sobek in that he is the anti-aggressor. He makes it really hard for Cuchulainn to play super far up. But not only that, he doesn't have the downfall of Sobek in the fact that he can't trade early. Herc can definitely trade early, and he has much more power than Cuchulainn, and his autos hit much harder early on and into the mid game. So he'll just out-trade him super hard. The only thing with this matchup is, as long as you play it smart and don't randomly fight Cuchulainn when he's transformed and you have a wave to clear, then you should win the matchup pretty easily. Achilles is kind of the same way. He matches Cuchulainn's power early on. One of the best lane winners in the game. Obviously, he gets outscaled in the late game, but if you're looking to dominate the lane solely based on the lane, then play Achilles into Cuchulainn. That's definitely a good matchup. And also, no real way for Cuchulainn to avoid the execute apart from jumping over it, but that's a pretty rough play, and a lot of time you're using that to clear the wave. So Achilles can kind of just run him down as well. Cuchulainn will really never get away from an Achilles as well. And then Baron I have here because even though Cuchulainn will out-clear and kind of out-pressure Baron a little bit early on, once the level 5 hits his Baron, Cuchulainn can no longer play aggressive in the lane whatsoever, because literally Baron can pull the Cuchulainn across the entire lane. Even though you have 2 CC immune ults, they're short duration, and even though you have a dash and a jump, unless you're timing your transformation perfectly, you're going to get pulled under a tower a lot of the time, and as Cuchulainn, you want to play super aggressive, so it kind of just defeats the whole purpose. And not only that, but Baron's team fight in late game is really sick, so you're going to match a lot of the CC and the I guess impact that Cuchulainn has in the late game. So just a rough matchup overall, in my opinion. So yeah, that's Cuchulainn. Like I said, that's just gonna be the last one for today because the video is already so long and I didn't realize how much information I was gonna be talking about and stuff like that. It's over 40 minutes, I am sure, at this point. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you watched the entire video, please give it a thumbs up. I usually don't ask for that, but it's a long video. There's a lot of information, not a lot of content about this kind of stuff on YouTube, and I think for good reason. It's just a lot of stuff to go over, and it kind of gives you my very specific thoughts on things, but at the end of the day, I don't think it matters too much, and I'm definitely willing to help you guys out with this stuff. If you have any question or anything like that, feel free to leave it in the comments. I really do appreciate you guys watching this video, really do. And if you want to see more of this, obviously I'm going to be doing more, like I said, because it's going to be at this point, it's probably going to be like a 5-part series. But if you do want to see more of this, like I said, leave a thumbs up and, show your support in the comments and stuff like that. So anyway, hope you guys learned a thing or two. I'll see you guys in the next, I'll see you guys in the next counter matchup video for this kind of style. Yeah, so have a great day. Peace out.